If you have a dream, chase for it. Simulan mo nang abutin. Make it happen. Work and raise your family in Australia with AMVPS. Just make your future bright with AMVPS. Ang migration, education, pangarap ay maabot na. AMVPS, ang kasama mo. AMVPS, 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 AMVPS.
For inquiries, visit our website amvpsolutions.info and Facebook page Aussie Migration and Visa Professional Solutions.
You might think that OSHC is optional and not needed, right? Think again. OSHC, or Overseas Student Health Cover, is a health insurance for international students that covers out-of-the-hospital medical treatment, in-hospital medical treatment, prescription medicines, and emergency ambulance transport. The Australian government, through the Department of Home Affairs, requires all student visa holders to maintain OSHC during the entire stay. Otherwise, visa may be refused or cancelled. You need to have an insurance provider to cover for you. At AMVPS, we assist and provide information in finding the best insurance provider that fits your needs. We help you to make informed decisions about your healthcare while studying in Australia. Student Visa Condition 8501 states that overseas students who do not maintain OSHC are at risk of having their visa cancelled. Are you eligible for OSHC? Yes. Overseas students are eligible for OSHC. You are an overseas student if you are a person who is a holder of a student visa, or a person who is a student visa applicant and is a bridging visa holder and was immediately before being granted the bridging visa, the holder of a student visa. Your certificate of insurance will show which policy you have selected. For example, your policy may be either single, dual family, or multifamily. AMVPS is a partner with trusted insurance OSHC providers in Australia. OSHC saves you time and money, so you won't have to worry about the expensive medical bills should anything happen to you in the future. Get your OSHC policy today with AMVPS. For assistance, visit our website at amvpsolutions.info and like us on Facebook at Aussie Migration and Visa Professional Solutions.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. My name is Edmund Galvez and I am the Registered Migration Agent of Aussie Migration Visa Professional Solutions. Today's information session will be focusing on Vetassess. Vetassess is a skills assessing authority. And as you know, most of the visas, particularly the general skilled migration visas, require a positive skills assessment. Now, Vetassess assesses majority of the occupations. And in this discussion, we will be talking what are the stages, second, what are the requirements, and also the fees. So, allow me to share my screen. So, as I mentioned, Vetassess assess 28 trade occupations and more than 360 professional occupations from various industries. Now, skills assessment, as I mentioned, is important for skilled visas 189, 491 because it is a mandatory requirement. These are skilled visas and you must have a positive skills assessment before you can apply. Now, skills assessment is just one of the requirements for you to be able to apply, but this is the most important one. The purpose of the skills assessment is to determine that your skills, knowledge acquired outside Australia is equivalent to what the Australian government is looking in that particular occupation. Now, if you receive a valid skills assessment result, that is for 3 years. And this skills assessment result, the process does not require English test. Now, take note that for you to be able to use the skills assessment result, it must be valid at the time of application or at the time of invitation. So it's very important. Now, don't worry if the skills assessment is about to expire and you still have not received the invitation, it can be renewed. Now, as I mentioned, the visas that may require skills assessment are under the general skilled migration visas 189, 190, 491. And also for the temporary graduate visa under the graduate work stream. So this is for trade occupations. And also some occupations in the employer-sponsored visas, such as for 82186. Now, for today's information session, we will be focusing on the trade occupations. Now, as I mentioned a while ago, Vetassess not only assess trade occupations, but also general occupations, professional occupations. We will be having a separate information session about professional occupations with Vetassess. Now, these are some of the famous and common occupations. Number one is automotive electrician, air conditioning and refrigeration mechanic, welder, vehicle painter, baker, diesel motor mechanic, pastry cook, hairdresser, carpenter, fitter, plumber, and electricians. Now, in the website of Vetassess, there are fact sheets for each occupation. So it's nice that you read those fact sheets so that you will have a good background knowledge about the requirements. Now, for trade occupations, there are two pathways. Now, pathway one is the common pathway for those who have not studied in Australia. However, if you are already inside Australia and you finished an Australian qualification in relation to that particular trade occupation, then you will be under pathway 2. So the difference for these pathways is that pathway 1, the applicant don't have Australian qualification or occupational license, while pathway 2, the applicant have Australian qualification or occupational license. Now let's discuss these pathways. Now, for pathway 1, the minimum employment requirements will depend if the occupation is licensed or not licensed. Now, the common denominator between these occupations, licensed and unlicensed, is that the applicant must have worked in the occupation for at least 12 months within the last 3 years at the time of application. So, at the time of application, at least 12 months within the last 3 years. So, for example, the applicant applied today, August 18, 2021. So, he must have at least 12 months of work experience from 20, let's count 3 years backwards, 2020, 2019, 2018. So 2018, 2019, 2020, or 2021, he must have at least 12 months in those period to be able to apply and meet this employment experience requirement. Now, for licensed trade with no formal training, the applicant must have 6 years of employment experience. For licensed trade and the applicant have or has relevant formal training, the minimum employment experience requirement is only 4 years. Now, what are these trade occupations that are licensed? So these are electricians, plumber, and air conditioning and refrigeration mechanic. So 6 years if the applicant has no formal training, and 4 years if the applicant has formal training. And at least one of those years must be within 3 years. At least 1 year or at least 12 months within the last 3 years. Now, what about for non-licensed trade occupations such as chef? Now, for applicants with no formal training, the minimum years of experience must be 5 years. For applicants with formal or with relevant formal training, the minimum experience must be 3 years. Now, as to stages. Now, there are 2 stages for the trade occupation under Pathway 1. Now, the first one is evidence review. You cannot proceed with stage 2 if you fail stage 1. Now, in stage 1, the assessor will review the evidence provided to check you have sufficient employment experience and the skills and knowledge required to work in your occupation. So you need to submit several documents, which we will discuss later, such as employment reference, your transcript of records, your license, your passport, and other necessary and relevant documents. Also, under stage 1, the assessor will conduct checks, including calling your referees to confirm that your evidence is genuine. So, another important document here would be the employment reference that specifies what are the duties and responsibilities you have done in relation to the occupation that you seek to apply. And also, because the assessor will call the referees, you must provide current contact details. Now, if you pass stage 1, then that's not enough. You need to pass stage 2. Now, stage 2 is the practical assessment and or technical interview. Take note that not all trade occupations need practical assessment and technical interview. Now, what happens during practical assessment? In a practical assessment, the applicant will complete a series of tasks while being watched by an assessor. However, or on the other hand, in a technical interview, the applicant will be asked a range of questions about the skills and knowledge required to work in the occupation. So the assessor will be speaking in English, so there's no need for an interpreter. Now, if you're applying for a licensed occupation, that is the time wherein you need to pass both practical and technical interview. Now, let's proceed with the assessment outcome. If the stage 1 and stage 2 are successful, then the applicant will receive a successful assessment outcome letter plus an Australian Certificate 3 or 4 qualification and statement of results and offshore technical skills record. If the assessment is unsuccessful, then you'll receive an unsuccessful assessment outcome letter and a statement of results and statement of attainment. Later on, we will know that you may question the result. You can apply for appeal. Now, let's proceed with Pathway 2. Pathway 2 are for applicants who have finished an Australian qualification. Now, what is the scenario here? The applicant has a long work experience in the Philippines as a chef, but entered Australia studying commercial cookery. Now, can he apply for Pathway 2? Yes. So that's an example for an applicant who will be able to apply for Pathway 2 because he is holding an Australian qualification. Now, what are the requirements that he must submit? Number one, he must submit an accepted qualification at the time of application. And number two, evidence that the applicant have worked in paid employment in the occupation for at least 3 years, full-time or part-time equivalent. And this evidence can include taxation records issued by ATO, annual payment summaries, group certificates, payslips, and bank statements. So we will discuss later after Pathway to the financial records. And another document is the evidence that you have worked full-time in the occupation for 12 months in the last 3 years. And after you have uploaded all relevant and verifiable evidence, you will pay for the first stage of the assessment with the Trades Recognition Australia. Now, same with Pathway 1. Pathway 2 have 2 stages. Stage 1 is evidence review. So assessing of documents, calling of referees, and checking the pay slips and the bank statements, the taxation records. While stage 2 is the technical interview, the assessor will ask you a range of questions about the skills and knowledge required to work in the occupation. So those are the 2 pathways. Again, Pathway 1 for those who don't have Australian qualification, and Pathway 2 for those who have Australian qualification. Now, as to the common evidence requirements, for both Pathway 1 and Pathway 2, you'll be required to submit employer statement or employment reference letter. Now, aside from that, you also need to provide financial evidence. Now, financial evidence, you need not submit 4 of the following enumeration. You only need to submit at least 2 of the following items per year of claimed employment. Now, so if you're claiming for 3 years, then you must submit the following documents per year. So number 1, official government tax records. And these may include payment summaries or notices of assessments. If you have work experience both in the Philippines and in Australia, you can combine. 3 pay slips citing names of employer and employee. And for the pay slips, you must submit at least 3 start, middle, and end of each year claim superannuation documents with the name of the applicant and the employer, and also bank statement with the employer's name clearly showing that the income has been deposited. So among these 4, you only need to submit 2. So if you don't have, or if you cannot see the tax records, then you can use the payslip and the bank statement. Or if you cannot see the payslips, then you can submit the tax record plus the bank statement. Now, take note that statutory declarations about employment experience are not accepted in the absence of employer reference and financial record. What about the employment statement details? Now, the employment reference letter must mention the following information. First, the exact employment period, the start date and the end date. Second would be the normal hours of work. Can be 20 hours per week or 40 hours per week. The nature of the employment, whether you're a regular, a part-time, or a casual, it doesn't matter. The job title, this is very important, and the job description. Take note that the assessor will look into the duties and responsibilities that is attached to the occupation that you are doing. That's part of the assessment. The name and address of the business on official business letterhead. So the employer statement must use the letterhead of the business. The name, position, contact details, date, and signature of the authorized person who makes the statement. And the length of time they supervise the applicant. Now, this is very important because the assessor will call the company. So again, aside from the name, position, contact details, and contact details should be both phone number and email, it must also state the length of time that the person has supervised the applicant. And take note that this must be the employer or the immediate supervisor. Now, finally, about the fees. Now, it's not a small amount of money. So the important thing that you need to do is have all the information needed so that you can have and prepare all the necessary documents before you apply, because the fees are not small. For stage 1, you need to pay 1,280 for the documentary evidence assessment. And for stage 2, the technical interview is for 2,000 Australian dollars, while the practical demonstration is $2,200. So that's all for now. Thank you so much for attending today's information session, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
A dream. Everyone has it. Distractions are everywhere, which makes us feel far from our dreams. Now, there is a way to close that gap. With AMVPS, we can take the one less travel by, and that has made all the difference. Whether big or small, our dreams are there to take us to write our future. Be a scholar now. To learn more, visit our website at amvpsolutions.info. Like us on Facebook at Aussie Migration and Visa Professional Solutions.
If you have a dream, chase for it. Simulan mo nang abutin. Make it happen. Go on and study in Australia with AMVPS. Let's make your future bright with AMVPS. Legal migration, education, pangarap ay maabot na. AMVPS, ang kasama mo. AMVPS, 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 AMVPS.
Let me that one. That one.
One of the best feelings in life is having moments with the ones you love, even if you're far away from each other. Despite being 1,000 miles apart, our feelings haven't changed.